Hey there, and welcome to the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast. I am thankful that you're a part of my community, that you listen to my podcast. I hope you're enjoying them. As you know, it is my purpose and mission to help you achieve more of your goals and your dreams. And more importantly, it's also my mission to help you find more fulfillment and happiness in life. And so today, I've got an interesting podcast for you, an interesting thought that I want to share with you that kind of came up on accident. I mean, it's not a far-fetched reach from the things I normally teach on, but listen, I go a little bit deeper in this podcast, and it's all around the concept of words can kill you. All right? Now, that sounds really strong, but it's true. And I want to show you the power of words. And then I want to challenge you to hold yourself to a higher standard. You see, it was last weekend I was doing a training to a group of very successful sales professionals. It was a small group. It was with the car maker Lexus. And as I was working with them, I've been working with them for over 4 years, so they know me pretty well. And when I went in this past week, and my plan was to talk to them about productivity, time management, measuring your results, setting some new goals, those kinds of things. And someone mentioned something in the opening that had to do with words and the power of words. And that just caused me to think about something, and I responded to it, and then I opened up with some personal experiences that I thought would be useful for the conversation. And I thought, hey, I'm going to bring you right into that sales meeting, and you can listen to what happened. And I get that it's going to be kind of a strong point of view, but hopefully it's a reminder to you, a little checkup from the neck up, if you will. Now, before I take you into that portion of the sales meeting, let me just read something from a great book that came out several years ago called Love, Medicine, and Miracles by Bernie Siegel, Dr. Bernie Siegel. And what a great book that is. And I think he was a great man. And let me just read from his book, The Power of Words. And by the way, he was a surgeon. He worked with people that had cancer and so forth, and so he had been doing this for many, many years, and then he wrote this book. And he says here, many patients already know something of this link and only require an open-minded doctor to be able to use the knowledge. As one person said, quote, I was always considered spineless, and here I've developed multiple myeloma in my backbone, unquote. Wow, do you see that correlation? He goes on. Or a woman involved in a stressful love affair with a married man says, I was afraid I'd get cancer, and I knew if I did, it would be in the cervix. Wow. After seeing a man with cancer of the rectum, I asked him what had happened in the last year or two of his life. He said, nothing much. So I asked his daughter, and she said that she had married a man out of the family religion, and her brother had run away from home. Later, while helping the man explore his attitudes in ECAP, one of the other members said, that boy must have been such a pain in the ass. A multiple sclerosis patient whose household left her with 5 young children to care for lost her use of her right hand. She told the doctor she had just lost her right-hand man. Wow. To an outsider, he says, a connection may sometimes seem far-fetched, but only the patient can finally judge whether it's real or not. Having seen it happen time and time again, I have concluded that we sensitize the target organs of our bodies in a form of negative biofeedback. He goes on. Let me keep reading here. The mind does not act only through the conscious choices, however. Many of its effects are achieved directly on the body's tissues without any awareness on our part. Consider some of the common expressions. Quote, he's a pain in the neck, or he's a pain in the ass, or get off my back, or this problem is eating me up alive, or you're breaking my heart. The body responds to messages, whether conscious or unconscious. In general, these may be either live or die messages. I am convinced, he says, we not only have survival mechanisms such as fight or flight response, but also a die mechanism that actively stops our defenses, slowing our body functions and bringing us toward death when we feel life is not worth living. Wow, is that deep or what? And listen, on the subject of meaning, I've taught many podcasts and shared with many audiences the power of finding meaning in life, but not just in life, finding meaning in every situation. And sometimes we find, based on this context, we find meaning in a negative way, and our body harmonizes with that definition, if you will, that we put on it. So you've got to consciously think about the words you use and if they're effective and if they're taking you where you want to go. Are they bringing light in your life and illuminating you, or are they dragging you down? Here's another example. Another book that I have was a New York Times bestseller called The Hidden Messages in Water by Masaru Emoto from Japan. He's a scientist over there. And what he did was revolutionary, where he discovered that molecules of water are affected by our thoughts, words, and feelings. So let me just give you a quick visual of this in this podcast. But basically, there's a lot of pictures in this book. And here's what he basically did. He took 2 glasses of water, and he put water in the glasses. And then he took 2 pieces of tape, and on one piece of tape, he wrote the word love, and on the other piece of tape, he wrote the word hate. He put both those pieces of tape on the 2 different, so you put one tape that said love on one glass of water, and then you put the tape that said hate on the other glass of water. And then he put both of them into a freezer. And when they froze, he would take them out and he would look under a magnifying glass. And let me tell you, the pictures are in the book. It's really amazing. You have those ice crystals or snowflakes that are looked at under the microscope with the glass that had the label on it titled love. Wow, those ice crystals and snowflakes are beautifully formed. They're evenly formed. There's harmony with them. They're elegant. But you go over and you look under the microscope of the glass that had the word hate on it, that water or those ice crystals are chaotic, disorganized, and literally ugly. It's unbelievable. Same water, same glass, same freezer, different result. The power of words. Now, I know that is a little bit deep, but I'm about to go deeper with you and give you a little insight into my world, which you may or may not even agree with. But raising my kids when they were young, I knew the power of words and how they can lift us and how they can destroy us. And so I taught them a high standard when it came to language. And so here, I just want to take you right into the sales training that I was doing for these sales professionals. And I kind of went off script in the beginning as people were coming into the room, and boom. Anyway, let's just jump right into it. Here we go. Leave the door open.
Hot air.
Watch your language.
Watch my language. Yeah, I have a problem with that. I interviewed, let me just start off. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's great to be with all of you. I've got today's going to be a little bit thought-provoking. I'm going to have you do some thinking around your own results today. But before we get into that, on that comment about language, I interviewed on my podcast Gary John Bishop, who wrote the book, it became a New York Times bestseller, Don't F Yourself. And then he's coming out with a new book in April called Stop Doing That Blank, if you know what I mean. At the beginning of the call, I told him, because you always start off, they're video calls, right? So you can go to YouTube and watch these interviews I have with folks. But I asked him, I said in the very beginning, I said, it's nice to have you on the show. I'm going to introduce your book, but I got to tell you, my value system has a high standard around language, so I'd prefer not to use the last word in the title of your book. He jumped ahead of me and said, not a problem. We'll just call it, Stop Doing That Shampoo. And I thought that was a pretty cool response because in a sense, someone could take it as though I was attacking their creative rights, and would never be my intention. But for my audience and my kids who, anyway, try to live a high standard that way, I didn't want to go there. And I will tell you how cool people are behind the scenes. He said, let me tell you, I'm on CNN, I'm on MSNBC, I'm on Fox News, I'm on other channels in the media. And to be honest, I don't cuss that much. And I thought, no, that's awesome. A couple months earlier, I was and by the way, this is no judgment on you, right? This is just TJ Hoisington's belief system. I was on another call and I noticed as I was reviewing this person, I was on their podcast, I noticed next to all their shows was an E for explicit. And so I listened to a couple of the shows just to know what I was about to get into as a guest on this guy's show. And I got to be honest with you, I was nervous. We do the interview, 45 minutes long, not one curse word. I didn't say anything to him, not one cuss word. We get to the end. He knows the interview is in, thank you for being on the show, but then these guests stay on for another 10 minutes and we just chit chat. If I could show the chit chat that I have with these people, wow, it's pretty cool, some of these folks. It's just awesome. He says to me, I'm thinking about taking my book off of Amazon, do some updates to it. I'm wondering, Mr. Hoisington, what would be your thought on whether I should leave the curse words in or whether I should take them out? What do you think I said?
Take him out.
I said, do you really think you are going to lose sales because you don't have curse words in your book? I said, I don't believe you will. Now, whether you do or don't, it's up to you. But I said, if you are going to stand as a pinnacle in the personal development world, then why don't we be the highest possible example of excellence that we can be? Does that make sense to you guys? Now, there's no judgment individually on you. I'm just saying, if you're going to represent in the personal development world, and yet I listen to these personal development wannabes, gurus, if I were to go back 30 years, there would be professionals rolling in their grave to hear some of the language that's on these stages today that's acceptable in the professional world. But I just find it interesting how we all have different beliefs. Let me tell you how extreme it is in my home, and you're going to really think I'm cuckoo and crazy. Okay? But here it is in my home. We don't use the word, when I was raising my kids, right? I got a 20-year-old and almost a 19-year-old and a 13-year-old and an 8-year-old, almost 9-year-old. When they were really little, I thought, because I write about thoughts or things, I write about the power of words and so forth. I said, we're not going to use the word but, crap, idiot, stupid, dumb. Ever since my kids were 2 years old, or whatever age they were, we don't use that word. Now when dad slips and I go, dang it, like I hurt myself working out on the yard, or I said, oh, because of my own upbringing, right, I use those words. I was like, oh, that was stupid. And I'll whisper it under my breath, and I'll forget I have a daughter standing next to me. She will run into mom and say, Dad just cussed. And I get in trouble the moment I go in the house because we've created this culture. And now my boys are older and they have these girls coming over to the house, and they use some of that language. And I'm just glad that my daughters don't recoil when they hear some of that, because we've created such a high standard. And my son comes back from his mission and he goes, Dad, you do not believe how high standard you raised us in terms of the language. So anyway, it's not a judgment on you. I have friends that talk that way. It's okay. Just keep it in check, right? Too much of any good thing can become a vice. So what'd you think? That's a pretty high standard, isn't it, with my kids? I mean, hello, it's true. If I say a word that's a little bit off because it slips because of my own upbringing and so forth, and I don't say any heavy words, but, I tell you what, I get in trouble. And that's okay because we're holding ourselves to a high standard. And that high standard, my wife and I created for our family. And I just want you to think about the power of words in the workplace and the people that you work with. Is it really serving you to the best of your ability? I suggest that there are more people than you think that are turned off by it than turned on by it. I know the trend today is a lot of speakers, thought leaders, and so forth throw all kinds of trashy words out, and it's not becoming of them. You see, Michelangelo, there's a story told of Michelangelo where when he was studying in college, he was putting together a bust of a woman. And his professor came by and knocked that bust onto the floor. It broke into 1,000 pieces. And Michelangelo looked up at him like, "What did you just do?" And the professor said, "It wasn't worthy of you." Now, I get that this is a high standard. So just listen in a spirit of agreement. Although I recognize some of you listening may not totally agree, and that's okay, because we live in a big world, and it's beautiful, and the diversity is great. But I've been in organizations where I've met with leaders of organizations, or particularly a CEO who told me they had just brought on a new CFO, and she has a mouth like a sailor, and it's horrible. She'll be in meetings, and she'll just spout every word in the book out, and it bothers some of the people in the board, on the board. And so I said, "Well, what'd you do about it?" He says, "Well, it's very delicate. You got to be really careful, right? People have the freedom of speech and they have the, whatever, that they want to talk. But there's a certain level of respect too." And so I went up to her and I said, "Hey, do you recognize that maybe some of that language might not be embraced by some of the people in the room and in the meetings?" And she said, "I don't care. I can speak the way that I want to speak. Who are you to judge, basically?" And of course, he couldn't say much, but he just said, "Hey, be mindful of other people." And so that's my suggestion to you. In America, if you're listening to this and you're familiar with the United States of America, there's now laws around smoking in public places. And so they have places set aside for people that want to smoke. Now, do you have the right to smoke? Of course you do. But do you have the right to infringe on someone else's health who doesn't want to inhale that smoke? No, you don't. And I think, in a way, that can cross over to language. Let's be aware of the language we use because it may not be uplifting to some people, and you want to be respectful of all people, starting with yourself. Hold yourself to higher standards when it comes with your language. And let me just say again and repeat that Gary John Bishop, although he has some bold book titles, and yes, there's some language in some of those books, I get the spirit in which he is speaking from to a degree, but you know what? He was way cool. Class act. I respect the man. Good man. Anyway, so that was pretty cool. But I will tell you this, years ago, over 20 years ago, when I was working with Tony Robbins and I had listened before working with him, all his tapes and CDs and so forth, I never heard a cuss word. I mean, maybe a one or two, but it was very minimal. And then I took my wife, as I was an employee, to the Unleash the Power Within seminar. And from the start to the end, I could not believe how much cussing was going on in there. Now, that's not a fault to the man, I don't think, right? I'm not judging him as a man because I respect him and I respect his teachings, and I learned a ton working with him. But at the same time, I get that some of these speakers use that language to jolt your nervous system. And I want to just share with you my belief. Truth can jolt the nervous system. I've been able to jolt nervous systems to get people to think a different way without having to use that language, and you can do the same thing as well. All right, just be mindful of it. Now, in closing, let me just take you back into the sales meeting. Well, after the sales meeting, whenever you go off script and you follow that intuition and you speak about something, there's always 3 or 4 people that come up to you afterwards and it's like, dang, that was awesome. Well, I get done and I just want to show you a little bit of what a gentleman shared with me. He's about 65 years old, and he was just saddened by an experience he had around the concept of words related to his grandson. And so we walked outside, and he followed me to my car, and he told me the story. So I want you to listen to it. Here we go.
About a month ago, my 12-year-old grandson, his mom's a single mom, and they live really close to us. We've kept it that way because I'm kind of like a dad to him.
Yeah.
And, we're Christians. We go to church.
Yeah.
And we've taught him just like we taught our kids.
Mm-hmm.
Well, about a month ago, I was talking to my daughter on the phone. She was in her car on Bluetooth.
Mm-hmm.
And she was telling me about, I think it was this rental agency that she just bought a house. She was dealing with trying to get her deposit back, and they were treating her really bad, and she was telling me what some of the things the guy said, and I said, man, that guy's a real ass.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I didn't know she was on speaker. My grandson was in the car, and he started crying. It broke my heart, and she called me back and said, I just want you to know Owen's really upset. I said, why? Because you said ass. I said, oh my gosh. So I called him back and apologized to him. He was
Good for you. What a man.
He
What
was
a man.
he was upset. He told his mom, he's a real smart kid.
Mm-hmm.
He told his mom, I hear enough of that stuff at school. I don't want to hear it from Grandpa. Oh man.
I get that you were, looking at you, I can tell you were touched by that.
Oh man.
Wow. Let me tell you something. It was emotional. I got teary-eyed. He definitely got teary-eyed. And he felt the weight of his stewardship and responsibility to be a good example to his grandkids. So my message to you is, I don't know if there's any part of you that agrees with any part of this, that words do matter, that words either build or words destroy. And there's part of you that is like, I want to do a little better in that area. Maybe I've let it go too far. I say, hey, great, take a sabbatical from it. A sabbatical is good. Take a break from talking be mindful of who you talk like that around. In terms of my home, I get that my standard was really high and it remains high. And yes, I toyed with the idea is, well, they're going to live in the real world, and so we can't make them naive, if you will. And I had this argument early on for a little while, like a little bit of language would be okay, just so that they're not stunned when they go to school. And I'll tell you what, my wife could not agree with me. She was adamantly against that belief system, and in time, I agreed with her. Her point was this: they're going to go to school and they're going to hear that stuff anyway. We do not need to add to it in our home. They should be able to come to our home and have peace and safety and comfort to get out of the world and come to a safe place. And I thought, you're right. We don't need to add to it. We don't need to immunize them at home so they're better prepared when they go to school. No, you need to give a safe place when they come home. All right, hold your kids to a higher standard, but that starts with you holding yourself to a higher standard. Language, words are powerful. Words trigger images, which trigger emotion, and those emotions on the body level have an effect, all right? And I'll tell you right now, words predict and perpetuate performance. So the words you use impact your attitudes, they impact your work performance, they impact your sports, they impact everything. So be aware of the words that you're using. Are they empowering or are they disempowering? And do they lift people or do they pull people down? Maybe this reminds you of something that you already know deep down. And so I hope it's a good reminder. Now, being a part of my podcast, if you wouldn't mind, hey, give me a star rating, right? Just click a star. I would really appreciate it. And if you'd be so kind, hey, leave a comment. I would really appreciate it. I get the opportunity to not only interview some great people as part of this podcast, but like this episode, I'm able to share insights and concepts that can maybe help you. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear in a specific way that can be beneficial to you. So anyway, I wish you the very best, and may the best of your past be the worst of your future. Go out there and unleash your greatness within.
GreatnessWithin.com.